All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I am your host, Franco, and I'm joined with Yona Aniwodi. It's great to have you on, Yona. Yona was just
Great.
telling me about how he has written about like 8 albums worth of songs in the span of 6 months. But in addition to that, Yona and I are here to discuss mental health as well as deaths of despair in young adults. And we're trying to spread awareness of that. And these deaths of despair have been increasing, and there needs to be more discussions about that. So, Yona, it's great to have you on. You want to tell us more about this and why this issue
First
is
of
so
all,
important
OCO,
for you?
as we say in Cherokee, hello.
Mm-hmm.
Weshadoli, many blessings to everyone. It's a pleasure to have everyone here. The first thing I would say is there's actually now a national hotline all across the United States available on landlines and cell phones. If you dial in 988, it will put you in immediate contact with someone at the crisis hotline for suicide prevention. That's something that the phone companies and the government did actually back in early 2020. Although I might say that I was checking in our local phone book last night at work at the Pizza Hut, and there was nothing in there about the suicide prevention hotline. And of course, in a regular printed phone book, Franco, you normally got umpteen emergency hotlines, which it had, but there was incredibly to me there was nothing at all in the current published phone book for suicide. And that,
Mm-hmm.
it troubles me that I'm just not really hearing anybody talk about this. I mean, I've done a lot of shows with Gloria on my own podcast about Haiti and other things that are going on, but even as sparse as the coverage has been on Haiti, there's even less coverage on these deaths of despair that have happened across not only the United States in particular. What bothers me the most is the spike in teen and youth suicides and deaths of despair, as well as drug overdoses, prescription overdoses, and the like. This has been an international phenomenon, and a lot of it's due to this social distancing policy. Because as a species, as the Homo sapien, we're a social species.
Yeah.
And all of us being told to go to your room, lock the door. Even I can remember some of the videos that crazy lady in Australia saying, "If you're doing your shopping, don't talk to your neighbors." That's
Yeah.
my
I
best
remember.
Australian accent. But I mean, just the most bizarre things, Franco, and that's so contrary to our mental health for all of us to be so shut in and isolated. And I mean, this isn't so much an indictment of the lockdown policy, but more an examination of the uh, results of that, the effects of that it's had on people's mental health in general, and most particularly in school age youth, because being sent home to do what do they call it, remote learning, schooling via Zoom, um, that has had an incredibly detrimental effect on youth um, mental health, and that's what's really got me down more than anything when I think about the large scale of things and all the things that are wrong with the world today. Um, I hate to quote Whitney Houston Brown, but the children are our future. I mean, literally, if children see no future and choose death and addiction instead of a future, I mean, what does that say about the direction? And for me, it's all points to the same concept, which is what I came to talk about today, and that is exhaustion. I feel like we have empire exhaustion. I feel like we're at a point of propaganda exhaustion, and at this point, people are so mentally frayed and exhausted, and more than anything, economically desperate
Yeah.
that they're taking positions and thinking of their careers and whatever it takes to get food on the table, sacrificing many things by the wayside. So I've seen a lot of people coping with the stress in different ways, but I really don't hear anybody talking about this, Franco.
Yeah, I don't hear many people talking about this either. And like in the alt media space or independent media space too, like this is something that we can tie this in with our current state of the country, the system, because a lot of people suffering with mental health issues who ultimately do end up um, resulting to drug abuse and all that, they do that because they can't afford to go see a therapist or go see a doctor for other health issues that they're dealing with. A lot of these things pile up. The debt that they owe, all these things pile up, and so they don't know what to do. Spirituality, psychology, all that stuff is not taught in our school, so people are just don't know how to handle themselves. So what are your thoughts on that, Yona?
Well, again, it just feels like everything is converging upon the point of exhaustion. You know, our drinking water systems and wastewater sanitary treatment systems are completely exhausted and failing all across the country. Most famously these days is Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint,
Yeah.
Michigan, but it's actually hundreds of cities where the public infrastructure is completely exhausted. Most everyone that was fortunate enough to get stimulus checks during the previous administration. And then there was technically one $1,400 check with the current administration. You saw spikes in the savings rates, obviously, when those checks went out from the government to citizens. However, again, savings have been exhausted. Borrowing is at an all-time high, and I think the Fed is going to announce yet another rate hike today to interest rates, which makes borrowing and lending even more impossible than it already is. So, in terms of finances, most people are already exhausted. I mean, before the pandemic hit, the majority of working Americans had less than $400 in savings. Yeah, that's one reason why I call my show Iona with the lower caste, the peasants podcast, because to me, I see a lot of solidarity with people here in the coal fields of West Virginia and people working at the submarine facility in Sevastopol, Crimea. We're just working people, and we don't care who is the number one or the number two world's arms dealers and all the others political gamesmanship going on with energy markets that we see playing out with sabotage of Nord Stream and other things. Again, I focus back to the plight of normal children going to school, whether they're going to Sevastopol High School in the Crimea, now annexed to Russia, or going to Huntington High School here in West Virginia, Cabell County. Um, Most regular people have so much more in common. And so I see this point of exhaustion now. I'm hoping that we can steer this to a point of solidarity and realize that the poor people in Appalachia, the poor people up on Kensington and in Philadelphia, in Camden, New Jersey, the poor people all across this world, all are in the same boat. And we can clearly see that the us and them is not an us and them between citizens or particular nationalities or ethnicities or anything of that sort. It's not between different flags. It's between literally a criminal ruling international elite. Um, and we see this clear divide and conquer going on, but yet, even though we're supposed to be at odds with so many of these other different flags, they're all playing, they're all dancing to the same tune when it comes to, uh, the direction they want to go. And so in the meantime, I could go into that, but everyone's covering,
The same.
centralized bank currencies and World Economic Forum, and that's good. But meanwhile, we're still living our day to day lives, and this is really mentally exhausting. It's really trying. And for me, what's been the worst repeated gut check has been people that I look up to, sources that I normally go to for information. I mean, if I look back, who did I used to watch? Some 4 years ago. I'm not going to go through lists of names. That's a dangerous subject. But basically, I would rather say in general, I've just watched one after another fall off, so to speak, and choose career over principle. And I
Mm.
can understand out of economic desperation wanting to put food on the table. But, there's also, can you sleep at night, and are you consistent? And so I've seen so much inconsistencies, so much inconsistency, I should say. And in particular, out of all of this exhaustion from mental stress, more and more people taking refuge in social media silos, taking refuge in different cults of groupthink. And, obviously, I think social media makes this far more toxic because it seems to magnify the effect of being in different echo chambers. My favorite analogy, Franco, is to imagine junior high school in the lunchroom,
Mm-hmm.
and what table do you get to sit at,
Yeah.
during seventh and eighth grade, and it's on that same lower vibrational level, I find, of, you know, being more concerned about personal branding and popularity and following and subscribers. That's also a toxic thing. That's not a replacement for IRL type, relationships and intimacy, which has become such a challenge in the current um, situation we find ourselves because there's so much um, animosity between these different ideologies, these different worldviews, shall I say, to the point that there's even different dating apps, whether or not you're VBNMW or MAGA, or I mean, you get what I'm
Yeah.
going with,
To
right?
see if they're
How
compatible based
divided.
on ideology and all that.
Yeah,
Um, there's definitely like pros and cons to the internet. Like for example, there's a lot of sources online if you look at the for the right places on learning more about spirituality, learning more about yourself, how you can be more self-aware. However, a lot of people are hidden from that, or they get stuck somewhere in like some other rabbit hole because they find like an Andrew Tate, or they find some kind of I don't know, some other public persona, and then they find like a whole community that also follows that person, or follows some group or ideology. Like for example, you brought up MAGA. People confine themselves to that group. They might see some truths there in that group, or something that they're misguided about, but they find a sense of community there. But because
it
everybody in that
fulfills that
community,
need. It
yeah,
does.
but because some people in that community, or it's going to be the majority of them oftentimes, they're not very self aware either. It's just confirmation bias. A lot of the wrong ideas get spread within there, and then at the end of the day, they don't get their own personal issues resolved in that group, and sometimes there's like inner conflicts in there, and then it doesn't really help with their mental situation. When they're confined in there,
Yeah.
they think that the problem is people in other groups, the other tribes. Oh, they're the problems, and then they stay confined in that group, talking negatively about all these other groups, and it's a distraction because this is a whole systemic problem,
Mhm.
and we need to start talking about that. How can we solve these problems right now that the elite class are creating and that are exacerbating with the whole transhumanist agenda, things that they're doing with the World Economic Forum, having control over our crops, our agriculture, making us more dependent on them, having everything become more virtual instead of in person. So how do we solve all that?
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
it's really interesting, because well, it kind of came to the forefront in terms of media coverage when Dr. Robert Malone, who is one of the inventors of the mRNA technology, as they
technology.
refer to it, and he improperly coined the phrase mass formation psychosis by
Yeah,
concatenating two separate concepts, and that is mass formation and then also group psychosis or formation psychosis. But if you go to the real source of research on this, that being the Belgian academic Matthias Desmet, who I believe is a psychologist, he's written extensively on mass formation and how it really fulfills a need of intimacy and social interaction for people to be, welcomed into these cult cults of thought, these
yeah,
cults of ideology, and people are welcomed in. But ultimately, what we see is that it's just more abuse upon abuse. It's insult added to injury in a time of unrelenting pharmaceutical advertising across all media and a cognitive dissonance that governments, World Health agencies, and others, including the manufacturers themselves, have now admitted that they are deliberately misleading the public so as to not affect the uptake rate of new products, many of which have not undergone rigorous testing, much less received full product approval. So we are currently in the United States, I speak of in particular, we're currently the most medicated and prescribed population,
yeah.
particularly among children. And so, again, I have to think, you know, um, correlation is not causation, but I have to think that just looking at a basic statistical analysis of the number of children now prescribed medications, many of which are prescribed off label. So
And
it's
Jonas,
not
some
what the medication was initially intended to be used for, and they're just handed out to children. I mean, I speak from having, my normal job is delivering pizza, and being a pizza guy, I go everywhere. And
yeah.
delivering to the school nurses at the local public schools, whether it's the elementaries, the junior high, or the high school. I'm not going to name everyone I deliver to, but I'm always just gobsmacked when I go into the school nurse's office for an elementary school, grades kindergarten through fourth grade. Okay. And she's got this whole wall of the little Monday through Friday things like you would see for Peepaw or Mama and Nana, maybe an octogenarian has all their pills and a thing, but this is for the kids. And I mean, out of a enrollment of maybe 250, there had to be 80 of
So
them on the wall giving
sounds like
out
it's getting
pills every day to these
worse.
kids. I don't understand.
Because I didn't see that when I was in elementary school, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me now. And you mentioned that, I mean, correlation is not causation, but from what I've seen, there is evidence of the causation as well. Because
Mhm,
these mental health prescription drugs that they give people,
mhm.
Xanax and can't remember the other ones off the top of my head right now, but
Klonopin, Adderall.
yeah, yeah, they are tied with messing up with our hormones, which then
Mhm,
influences our mood and our state of mental being, and it also affects our dependency on these drugs, and we can't self-regulate ourselves to feel better. And that's why they have to increase doses and all that.
You know, probably to me, the biggest stress that I deal with is the constant erosion of trust. And that is, as a result of now hearing these admissions from, in particular, most famously, what was it, last week, when the executive from the Pfizer Corporation, who was sent in place of the CEO, Albert Bourla, who ducked out of answering questions from the European Parliament, sent her in his place. And she admitted publicly that they had never tested for whether or not transmission was prevented before releasing the product. And it was a very public admission. It's been international news ever since, quite sensational. But I mean, from the perspective of here on the ground in West Virginia, I mean, we look at what Big Pharma has done with deaths of despair from Oxycontin and other prescriptions just poured into this area that's led to an epidemic of deaths that continues to increase. So, this erosion of trust, our trust has been exhausted by the official government agencies we're led to believe all of our lives are trying to protect health and human safety. I mean, we used to think that the Federal Aviation Administration was regulating the Boeing Corporation, and they would never put up a plane like the 737 Max that has a what was it called? MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. So it was basically the computer would take over the entire flight controls of the airplane and steer the nose into the ground, to the point that it led to Boeing having those planes grounded for what, over a year and a half, almost 2 years. Incredibly, they were put back in the air because they fixed the software. According to Boeing and FAA said, sure, that's fine. And we see the same playing out across the other agencies, not just the FAA, but also the Federal Elections Commission is now pretty much powerless thanks to the Citizens United and the McCutcheon versus FEC case, which legalized bribery. Um, the same thing with the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. They're supposed to be regulating Comcast, but the previous head of the FCC was Ajit Pai, who is a former executive from Comcast. And we see the same thing with the FDA and the CDC in terms of their funding structure. The majority of their payroll is bankrolled by Big Pharma itself. So how could you even be a regulator of a business that's paying your dental and health care? I just, again, as a parent with so many young children in the household, um, I can no longer trust anything. I mean, I have to read the ingredients on everything.
Oh yeah,
I have to know
yeah.
what's in it. And I certainly can't trust the FDA if they say it's safe and effective. I don't care what product they're talking about. I'm not trying to get you any strikes, Franco. I'm trying to be careful with my words and
Yeah, I
speak
think that's careful enough.
generally
Yes.
and conceptually rather than to specifically name any trigger words with the
Yeah.
algos. So, again, I apologize.
I mean, yeah, they add all this stuff to the ingredients of all our foods. Like there's all these artificial food colorings for our food, like Red 40, which are linked to anxiety and depression, as far as I know. I mean, people can go out there and confirm it for themselves. Look at peer-reviewed scientific articles which show this, and it also doesn't surprise me. And that's just the food coloring, but things like the overuse of soy, the overuse of corn, which is used in corn syrup and all of this other stuff, the overuse of dairy, the overuse of wheat and gluten and all that, which when they are made nowadays, it's like pesticides like that have ingredients like glyphosate are applied onto these crops. All these things are linked to autoimmune diseases. And with autoimmune diseases, that also affects your hormones and that affects your mental health. Um, not only does this affect the consumers, but a lot of these farmers are forced to work with these crops.
Mhm.
And I mean, they end up getting screwed over by these
Across
corporations
all
too.
industrial sectors, we've seen such intense monopolization
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah. So
point that, there now we speak of big oil, big ag, big pharma, big media, because there's been so much acquisitions and mergers, so much consolidation, even to the point of we hear so much talk about interruptions in supply chain and issues with supply chain in terms of delivery for diesel fuel. There's a crisis in diesel fuel, which is critical for transportation in the United States, considering so much is transported on 48 or 53-foot long trailers pulled by semi trucks backing into dry docks all around the country. So, I mean, diesel fuel is still much more expensive than gasoline. But when it comes to distribution of diesel, we go to our privately owned railroad system, and there are five Class One railroad carriers, and they're all pretty much owned and operated by BlackRock and Vanguard in New York City. And so, whether you're talking about Norfolk Southern or Burlington Northern Santa Fe or Union Pacific or CSX, it doesn't matter. They're getting orders from the same headquarters, and and so again, I just have so much erosion of trust being a practicing surveyor and engineer, and seeing how it just by all appearances it just seems like a controlled demolition of every pillar of society. I mean, how are people supposed to have trust in the hospitals when the good apples who were doing everything as advocates for their patients, the good apples who were trying anything and everything they could to save patients' lives, and not just writing prescription after prescription for remdesivir and Vents, which greatly enriches the hospitals because of the way that CMA, Center for Medicare Services, pays out. I mean, they're literally paying bribes if you pay out if you put patients on remdesivir, which has literally royalty money kicking back to Dr. Fauci with each dose given. I mean, the corruption is so conspicuous. There's receipts. I mean, we can see, and yet the good apples at the hospital, the good nurses who said, "I'm not going to give anything to a patient that I would not give to myself or my own children. I'll just leave the hospital." And like what's the name? The doctor at Baylor Health in Dallas,
hmm
cardiologist. Just a second. McCullough, Peter
yeah,
McCullough.
Peter McCullough.
He's in the news right now because again, the good apples are being selected for and defrocked and excommunicated from the new medical scientism faith. We move at the speed of science, and it's horrifying because as a result, who's left at the hospital? All of the automatons, all of those that just give whatever they. I mean, used to be when you go into a hospital, if you don't like what the doctor says, you go get a second opinion. Or if your family members are like, hey, we don't like this, we want to do something else. But now, still today, you go to the hospital, it's all the stuff with the social distancing and wear the mask, do the Macarena, do the hokey pokey. Parents, relatives, no family members are allowed past this point. We're deciding his care now,
It's
even if you have
horrible.
a medical power of attorney. I mean, it's just the most horrifying thing has happened in all these different pillars of society to cause an erosion of trust. And again, I think it's just people's trust has been exhausted by the police. I mean, you see one story, two stories, three stories, oh, well, it doesn't affect me. And then it affects you. And then you're like, well, now every time I see the police, I'm scared. It's like, welcome to Yona's world. I mean, you don't have to be doing anything wrong, but yet you find yourself having these conversations with other people saying that this is a real problem. And for a lot of people, until it affects them personally, or someone in their circle personally. It's like there's just a disconnect. And so again, I feel like that's the real issue today is there's so much disconnect between people that like people that I thought I knew that I've known for years and years and years are now coming out and saying things and doing things that just make absolutely no sense. And so, that's one reason why, I mean, my show Friday night, I'm just going all in on anti nuclear, pro peace. I can't, I mean, that's my new passion in life. Just
Yeah, that's good.
really, really promote peace and understanding and to put out a message there that, as pardon my language, as fucked up as the world is right now, there are people out there that still care.
Yeah,
Don't lose hope. Don't give
absolutely.
up on life. That's what they want you to do. And they being the genocidal maniacs that profit from death. And they always have. I mean, that's why Ferdinand and Isabel in Spain financed the Columbus expedition. It wasn't to raise the word of God. Perhaps it was to find a new trade route, but it was to make money most of all, to bring riches back to the Castilian crown. I don't see any different between today's so-called job creators. How is Elon Musk any different from Los Hermanos Pisados
Right.
or Hernan Cortez? They're just modern day versions of Los Conquistadores.
Yeah, and unfortunately, people still view Elon Musk as a savior who's going to come in and save Twitter, even though he wouldn't have gotten into the position that he's in now without getting his hands dirty and talking to some people at the top who do horrible things. Um, but yeah, that's going down like another rabbit hole. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on, since we were talking about all how this affects all these different sectors, and to tie this in with young adults dealing with death of despair and mental health issues. Um, we were talking about food and how that affects our mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff we eat. If you're having a poor diet, eating a lot of food with all these different ingredients and stuff like Red 40 and all these other things like excessive soy, excessive wheat, excessive
Partially
corn, and all of that.
hydrogenated fats, high fructose
Right.
corn syrup, all of the different
Schools,
things.
yeah, schools, elementary, middle, and high schools have a horrible selection of food for their students. Um,
Terrible.
and
And
it's
in
also
fact,
in
a famous
hospitals,
chef
even.
named Jamie Oliver from England. I don't know if you ever heard of Jamie Oliver. He's a famous cooking chef, kind of like a Gordon Ramsay type character. He actually came to Huntington, West Virginia, and did a an entire season worth of TV shows about revamping the school lunches in the Huntington Cabell County School District. And He opened up a kitchen and everything. And sadly, after he left town, um, they've kind of gone back to the old menu. But when it comes to the chemical cuisine, I look at the way. Well, I didn't really have a stark contrast until I moved to Ecuador and was living and working on the border of Peru for almost 2 years, and going to the mercado every day to get fresh pitahaya and achapillo and all these. I mean, real food, and it's
Yeah.
not been pickled in glyphosate, sprayed with multiple applications. Because what they don't tell you when we're talking about bioengineered food or GMO food or whatever euphemism they want to talk about, when it comes to the actual production of that food, what that means is, because that particular fruit or vegetable is genetically modified, it will tolerate being sprayed with glyphosate and not die.
Exactly.
But all the
Yeah.
weeds and everything else are supposed to die. So when it says GMO, what that means is we can now literally pickle this thing, constantly keep spraying it and spraying it and spraying it multiple times. to the point that all that gets absorbed through the skin of the fruit, through the skin of the vegetable, into the food product itself. So when you eat the GMO food, it's not the genetic engineering per se, it's what the GMO engineering allowed them to do to this product during its growth cycle and harvest. And
Yeah.
it's all of the additives that's making it. It's why I call American food chemical cuisine, because basically the American public is managed by the corporations that run this country, kind of like the way a farmer manages livestock using the good practices of animal husbandry, pretty much. It's animal husbandry for the Homo sapien. All
Yeah.
of these industrial, how it's made, favorite show on Discovery Channel, how it's made. Watch the one for hot dogs. You'll never eat hot dogs again. You don't want to see how the sausage is made, Franco.
Yeah,
Trust
yeah,
me.
yeah. I've seen it. I've seen those, and this is what they put in our school systems, and kids grow up on this, and then they suffer the repercussions later on in life with that poor diet that they grew up on, and then they have all these stomach problems. They develop autoimmune diseases on top of already if this child lives in a poor family household, a lot of times they have to result with these cheap foods that are also heavily adulterated, or they have to eat fast food, food from the fast food chains like McDonald's and all of that, and I mean they end
Worst of
up
all are
having
the
all these
additives in the water. That
right.
that to me is the real scandal, is the fact that if you want to try to avoid that and prepare your own meals and cook with your own fresh ingredients, so you're going to make your own sofrito and cook your own meal. Well, then you still have the issue: is there lead in your pipes? How much hydrofluorosilicic acid is the northern Florida Panhandle fertilizer industry sending to your local water company, where they're dumping in huge bags of fluoride to add to the water, supposedly because it's good for your teeth. There's some idiotic nonsense that actually causes mottling and damaging of the teeth. First, you get white spots, which is called fluorosis. But the point being, that's just one of the many vectors of heavy metal pollution that's being directly added. In fact, the first city to be fluoridated, the first municipal water system to fluoridate, was Maysville, Kentucky, which is about 30 miles down the Ohio River from where we're at here. Um, and there's a very clear, um, well, someone I really look up to, rest in peace, John Trudell. He was with the American Indian Movement and participated in the second occupation of Wounded Knee with Leonard Peltier and others. And he talks about this infantilization of the population, this constant paternalization to infantilize, to talk down to, and kind of like goo goo gaga to baby and make even more dependent the population. Just don't even think about it. We'll tell you what to think. You don't need an
Hmm.
opinion; you'll receive one. And it's and of course the most base form of this is trying to shoehorn everything into just a binary choice, into just a false dichotomy. So like, if I recognize that America has an empire, then clearly Putin is in the right. But wait a second, Russia has an empire too. I mean, you can't. Things are not just black and white. Dare I
Right.
say, there's 50 shades of gray. Christian, don't forget your safe word in the red room. There's so much in between, and I find more and more of these false dichotomies I'm having to confront. And to me, it's again, to look at it from our perspective as regular working people, just regular people in the lower caste, not in the professional managerial class or or in the upper income brackets. Most people just want to live in peace. Most people have common sense. Most people cook their own meals and 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 get by however best they can. But even here in Huntington, West Virginia, which by the way, the CDC last time around for about 10 years running, we are the most obese community in the United States.
Yep.
In a country that's lambasted the world over for having poor physical health, I'm in the worst city when it comes to obesity. And to me, it's a matter of the fact that our food is not nutritious. Our
Right.
food is
It's
chemical
not.
junk. Most of it. I mean, like for example, they add powdered cellulose to just about all the different cheese you
Yeah.
buy.
Oh
Powdered
yeah.
cellulose
It's
is a euphemism for sawdust. They're cutting sawdust into the cheese. I mean, into the cheese. Like I couldn't imagine going to Spain or Portugal or France or even Mexico or Peru or Ecuador, anywhere, and them adding wood chips to the cheese.
And
Like,
you brought up something earlier too about how they these crops are so like resistant to things like glyphosate or all these other uh, things that they put in pesticides, right?
mhm,
They're resistant to these harsh environments and they can be grown almost anywhere year round. That's not normal for a plant. And so your digestive system is also a
mhm.
harsh environment. So it's going to be really difficult to digest that. Your immune system is going to get confused and think that this is an intruder, something that they need to defeat. And over time, this is exactly how autoimmunes
It's really
diseases
rough. I
then
used to be able
develop,
to
and
eat 3 meals
allergies.
a day when I was in Ecuador. And when I came back here, I only eat about once every other day. I mean, I do the best I can to try to get good food, but I mean, so much of the food is it just destroys your GI tract, your gastrointestinal system.
Yeah, and then that affects your mental health as well,
Yeah,
because you need,
because
in order
it
to
causes
be in a
everything
good
to
state
be
of mind, you got to
inflamed.
eat well.
It causes a lot of inflammation, and then
Yeah.
out of that inflammation, then you get problems with your lymph nodes. You get the headaches, the migraines. You get put in a bad place. Yeah.
So people need to recognize that these issues are not going to be solved by like politicians or it's definitely gonna not going to be solved by corporations. They're going to put like little things to try to deceive people, like, oh, this is like our cows had a vegetarian diet, but corn and all this other stuff like that's vegetarian. It doesn't mean that the crops weren't given pesticides. It doesn't mean that the food that they were eating weren't GMOs, right? So you got to read carefully what it's actually saying. It's not only the cow wasn't only vegetarian fed, but they were grass fed specifically. It wasn't GMOs, no additives. They weren't giving any antibiotics, all that stuff. But it's really difficult to find, and the most likely places where you will find the healthiest food is in rich areas, right?
Hmm.
Or places where they have really wealthy people in the
And you
community.
have to pay a premium price too. To
Unfortunately, yeah.
eat good food, to eat real food, is going to cost real good money.
So one way that we can solve this problem then is to raise awareness, to do what you and I are doing right now, to talk about the problem, but then to also let people know what would not be a solution. It won't be our problems will not get solved by uh, corporations or politicians, which can be bought out by these corporations that want to continue the status quo.
Hmm.
So we need to talk about how we need to solve this issue as a community. We need to grow our own food. We need to constantly be informing ourselves and be aware of what are actual real solutions and which are the fake solutions. What else would you add on to that, Yona? What do
Well,
you
you
think?
know, I I really, as I was listening to what you said there, what came to mind was Gil Scott Heron when he talks about in his famous song speech, "The revolution will not be televised" by Gil Scott Heron, famous poet, and because he explains that the revolution begins in your mind when you decide to change, when you realize your own power, and begin to trust your own mental faculties, trust your own judgment. Think about it for yourself and see if it makes sense. Even though the ads and everything else are telling you don't listen to this, don't listen to that, just listen to this, and fact checkers have told you what to believe. And again, what I try to do every time I'm online, every time I'm in outreach, is to tell everyone you are powerful, you are intelligent, you can figure this out for yourself. And let me tell you, all of you are smarter than the people that are running this thing. I'm not the type to think that there's really this meritocracy of great intellectual power looming over top of us at their confabs at the Club of Rome and Davos and elsewhere where they cavort with one another. Um, I just don't see it that way. I see it as a kakistocracy where they've literally failed their way to the top. And it's just a cabal of criminals, pretty much. And, I would like to think as we're pushed closer and closer to the precipice of World War once again, that the common people all across this world will finally be able to enjoy peace and live in peace with one another, realizing that we're not alone. Don't let the stress get to you. Don't give up. We actually win in the end. These maniacs that are running the systems into the ground will hang by their own petards. They're already swinging by their own words and epithets that they put out just in the last 24 months, to the point that now there's a backlash against this amnesty they're pleading for. Oh, sorry guys about all those terrible things I said to most of the rest of humanity, and can you forgive me? Oops. And of course, I'm all for forgiveness. I can forgive, but I don't forget. And at the same time, I
Yeah.
understand the mental stress. We're seeing people act out from being under such constant stress that you reach the point of mental exhaustion. And we're just seeing these breakdowns. And so all I can ever say, usually to most people, is smoke more weeds. Yona loves you all forever. It's going to get better. Our side wins. Realize your own power. There is no Yona um, seminar or online course you can buy. You already have it. I have no grift here. I believe in everyone's ability to figure this out for themselves with their own heart and their own intellect and their own intuition. And it's more and more challenging because of the cognitive dissonance. You know, you can't know what's right or wrong. You can't know what's up or down. It's just all nebulous. There is no real thing. This cognitive dissonance that's focused in the what we've talked about as social media silos, and how the lower caste, as it were, the 99%, is constantly being further disambiguated into different cults of personality. Like the example you gave was like Andrew Tate, or these other, or Haas, or Vaush, or these other followings.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, that's fine, to watch people and follow people, but don't ever stop thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't ever stop feeling for yourself. You always have a right to your own feelings. You always have a right to your own thoughts. To me, there is no such thing as wrong think. The only wrong think in my book is no think.
Right. Now, what are some things that you think would help reduce mental health? Because we're talking about in the long term. We were just talking about how we have to build like better communities, stronger communities, less dependent on the predator class. But in the short term, what can we do to help people not have to res- uh, not suffer with death of despair or all these other mental health problems, would you refer them to certain sources or to do certain things? Like, what would you
Well,
recommend?
first of all, you have to realize that we're under attack. Our mental state is under attack. I mean, when we are constantly fed messages of fear and panic and dear God, don't get within 6 foot of this person and don't breathe for Christ's sake, and uh, to control you through your fear, to control you through your doubts, to control you through your own anxiety, and multiply that and magnify that to the point that you reach mental exhaustion. So for me, the first step in mental discipline is just the basic Cherokee meditation that we do, where before when first thing I do when I wake up in the day, whenever I get stressed out, some people would just like count to 10 mentally in their head, but for me, I count to seven, as in the seven directions, and that being there are six external directions and there's one internal direction. And so what it's basically a mental exercise to try to separate in your mind what is my thought, what is my lived experience, and what is a foreign thought that has come into my mind today. What is trying to warp or change my perception of reality such that, it's not what, again, the six directions out would be north, south, east, west, up, and down. And the seventh direction is going inside. And so, with each direction as I go through in that mental exercise, uh, when I think of the Galanati, the upper direction, I think of my ancestors. When I think of Eladi, I think of my children and nieces and nephews. And finally, when I get to the seventh direction, I go inside my heart and soul and think, um, you know, what is me and what is not me? And at least to be able to recognize that, because that's the whole problem. These messages, these stories, these narratives, these news flashes, they all actually shape our mental health
Hmm.
if you let it. And so, the joke was made that uh, I saw it. It was a cartoon of an Amish community living out in the wilderness with no television or telephone or anything. They said, and someone's asking about the coronavirus. They're like, oh, no one's gotten it here yet. We don't have TV. Like that, it's almost like, making fun of the psychosomatic that when you're so scared and afraid and just constantly hit with an electric cattle prod, just constantly kept in a fear state. That's on purpose. That's on purpose so that you won't stop and think, you know, and think this out for yourself. And so, most important for everyone suffering from despair and depression today, having, I'll be the first to admit, I've been taken to mental hospital before. I've suffered serious, serious bouts of suicide and depression. Still suffer with PTSD to this day, um, from being an Arabic code talker in Operation Desert Storm in the U.S. Army back in 1993 and 94. Full disclosure. Um, and it's really, I don't know. I guess I got to a point that I no longer feared death. I feared life.
Hmm. Yeah, I
And
get.
so now I don't have any fear anymore. And what took away that fear of the unknown to me is just the ability to surrender. And I guess some people would say that like a Judeo-Christian thing, and oh, you've been saved or something. But for me, it's just an acknowledgement that there are things beyond my control. I don't control when this volcano is going to erupt. I don't control when this tectonic plate is going to shift and cause a massive terremoto, I'm sorry, earthquake. You know,
Yeah.
there are things that are beyond my control, and I'm cool with that. And so what does it for me when I get totally stressed out is to go outside, to see your place in harmony with nature, and to realize that you're sharing this beautiful planet of bounty and bloom and harvest with so many other species that are just as intelligent and communicative as the human species. And so I may start sounding like my chief, but I mean, really, I mean, I go out and I literally have conversations with trees and rocks. They all have a story, and they all
Yeah.
listen to you too. So it's just, I don't know, to see your connection with the
Yeah.
life force and everything, and to not see things in such a linear fashion
Yeah.
or such a binary fashion, but to realize that it's a multitude of colors and that it's a cyclical thing, like the Mayan calendar. It's just that some of these cycles take a long time to flip all the way back around, like a Bach tune. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, definitely going out there in nature, grounding yourself, seeing that there's a bigger world out there that you are a part of. And at least from my experience, like when I've dealt with depression and or anxiety, when I would go out there in nature or start thinking more about the universe, myself would think my problems that I'm dealing with right now are so small and petty compared to everything else that's out there in this universe. And personally, what helped me deal with depression and other mental health issues was reading self help books, reading books on consciousness and spirituality. I get all these different perspectives. And then just talking to people close to me also would help a lot. But
If there's
yeah.
one piece of advice I could give to people in closing, that would be um, to read up about the concept of love and to further educate yourself and to disambiguate the concept of love and realize that in English language, the word love means many, 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 many different types of affection or infatuation. I mean, again, if you go to the Greek, they talk about agape love, of love without any ulterior motive. Whereas then there's also eros or erotic love. We all know what that is. XXX. There's different types of love.
Yeah.
And so, for us in the Cherokee philosophy of Kadua, we would call it adagesti, or the one love. That love which binds everything together, even at a molecular level. This one love that's forever. And so, um, and if there's any book I would recommend, it would probably be there's a number, but for starters, I would check out The Road Less Traveled by Dr. Scott M. Peck, MD, um, which again has several chapters that go deeper into the concept of love and what the different types of love there are, because nothing causes more heartache than issues of love.
Yeah. Well said, Yona. Is there like any songs you want me to play right now from your YouTube channel or Rumble,
Um,
just to
well,
close
if there
off?
was any one song I would want to dedicate right now, that would be incredibly. I just made a song Saturday night, uh, and it featured Takeoff and Offset and Quavo of the Migos, and it's on my Rumble channel. I'll get you the
Rumble?
link
Okay.
there for it
Okay. Okay.
over on
I'm gonna go.
Rumble.
I'm gonna go to your Rumble. But yeah, R.I.P. to
And of course, less than 36 hours after I made that song and then music video called "Lose Your T-Shirt to Dance," because I remixed Nigel Rogers of Chic with Daft Punk and Migos and everything. But anyhow, I guess it's been about a day ago now. It was it was Sunday night, Monday morning. Quavo and his cousin Takeoff of the band Migos were
Yeah.
at a bowling alley in Houston, um, and Quavo was playing a game of craps with dice, and words were said, and guns were drawn, and from what apparently the most recent update I heard from Ape and Preach was that it was actually friendly fire, that it was their security detail shooting at the other guys, and that's how Takeoff got grazed in the neck with a bullet and bled out so
Yeah.
quickly. But he was only 28 years old, so rest in
It's about
peace to
my
Takeoff.
age.
One of my
Right? Yeah. Rest in peace,
favorite bands.
Takeoff. So which song
It's
is it
called
that?
"Lose Your T-Shirt to Dance."
I see. I see. Okay.
17.5 remix, and I put up a picture of Takeoff there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll play this, and then we will close off with that. But yeah, Yona, thanks again, man. Thanks for coming on the show. This is
Anybody that
an
wants to
issue
follow me there,
really need to
just
talk
look
more
for
about.
Yona Aniwodi as my name is spelled. That's my handle for Facebook, for I think Twitter's still in my government name, Yona Anzelmo, Anzelmo. But Yona Aniwodi is also my handle on YouTube and BitChute and Odyssey and Venmo and Cash App and you name it. What's the other one? Vimeo. I have videos there. But anyhow, love you guys. Wesh Adoligi, Shatag Sasasti. Blessed on all your footsteps.
Yeah. Thanks again, Yona. Stay informed, everyone. You can hear it.
I can't hear the audio on it, but someone did suggest in the notes there that I also have a song about suicide, which I did intend to play. It's just that it crossed my mind about
So you want to play
Takeoff.
this one or the other one?
We can go to the YouTube one. There was no sound on the Rumble, but if you'll go to the song on YouTube, it's called Rectangle Pizza, and it's a song I wrote with one of my musical collaborators, Parappa Rappa, in our little side project, Bottled Water Box Dirt. It's called Rectangle Pizza, Rectangle and Square Cube, and it's particularly a song. He helped with the music, and then I added more music and wrote the lyrics.
Rectangle and square cube.
It's about child suicide.
All right, got it.
And the video actually features a local elementary school here.
All right.
When
You can
it's
hear that?
time for lunch,
There it
your
is.
teacher will walk
And your
you in a
sound is
line
good.
to
I'm
the
gonna go on mute.
cafeteria.
Love you guys.
It's
Awesome.
important when we're in the hallway that we are still quiet.
Remember
And you need to
988.
listen and follow your teacher's
Yeah, yeah.
directions.
When you need help, get help. Figure it out. Don't be boxing the dirt. Be water in a bottle. Oh, my sweet Jocelyn. Saw by my locker, but just not the talker. Drink honey dips, just shudder in my soul. Bell rings, time to eat those things. Oh, folding picnic tables, myths, legends, and fables. Never a welcome spot, so damn ready to split. Fully stings, pluck heartstrings, and sit. Never a welcome spot, so damn ready to split. Dinner is served, but not what I deserve. Cell phone hell home glued to YouTube. Pizza and rectangle, pepperoni and square cube. Now cobwebs in the lunchroom, hot heads of doom. Goofy about the koofy, only schooling via Zoom. No more IRL, most begin to fail. Ropes and razors,
Cat memes with lasers, smothered in neglect, hall cops with tasers. Prison and bedroom walls, more online calls. No light breaks the darkness, sine and cosine. Checked out, crying, shout, left me behind. Oh, Jocelyn. Dinner is served, but not what I deserve. Cell phone hellhole glued to YouTube. Pizza and rectangle, pepperoni and square cube. Now cobwebs in the lunchroom, hot heads of doom. Goofy about the koofy, only schooling via Zoom. No more IRL, most begin to fail. Ropes and razors, cat memes with lasers, smothered in neglect, hall cops with tasers. Prison and bedroom walls, more online calls. No light breaks the darkness, sine and cosine. Checked out, crying, shout, left me behind. Oh, Jocelyn. Checked out, crying, shout, left me behind.